I'm Ingrid, 26 years old, and for many years my parents told every employer in town that I was a thief. For 2 years I couldn't get hired anywhere in my town, not because I lacked qualifications. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA in accounting. I had glowing recommendations from professors, but none of that mattered, because my parents told every employer in town that I was a thief. My father said, "Maybe now you'll learn to respect us." He thought he'd broken me. He thought 2 years of rejection, 2 years of watching me scrub hotel toilets while he laughed, would bring me crawling back. He didn't know about the envelope. He didn't know what my grandmother had done 15 years ago, or why the CEO of Mercer Holdings was waiting for me. Before I continue, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with what I'm sharing. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to know. Now, let me take you back 2 years, to the day I discovered what my own parents had done to me. The Thornton family looked perfect from the outside. My father, Gerald Thornton, owned the largest construction company in our county. Our 2-story colonial sat on 3 acres, with a garage that held his Mercedes, my mother's Lexus, and my brother Marcus's BMW, a graduation gift for finishing business school. My mother, Diane, played the role of the devoted wife. Wedgwood china for Sunday dinners, fresh flowers from the farmer's market every week, a smile that never cracked in public, and Marcus, 4 years older, the golden child, the heir apparent. He'd been groomed to take over Dad's company since he could hold a hammer. Everything he touched turned to opportunity. Everything I touched was questioned. Growing up, I learned early that daughters had a different place in the Thornton household. When Marcus wanted to study abroad in London, Dad wrote the check without blinking. When I asked about the same program 2 years later, he laughed. "What for? You'll get married eventually. Save me the money." I went to the state university 40 minutes away, lived at home, commuted. At family dinners, the conversation always orbited around Marcus, his projects, his promotions, his future. I sat at the end of the table, passing dishes and clearing plates, while Dad carved the roast and dispensed wisdom to his son. "A man builds his legacy through his work," Dad would say, pointing his fork at Marcus. "Remember that." He never pointed that fork at me. When I was 16, I overheard him telling my mother something I've never forgotten. They were in the kitchen, voices low, and I'd paused outside the door. "Daughters don't need to achieve," he said. "They need to learn how to keep a home. Ingrid will marry well. That's her job." I stood there in the hallway, frozen. That was the first time I understood. In my father's eyes, I wasn't a person with dreams. I was an asset to be managed. The summer before college, my parents gave me a credit card. "For necessities," Mom said, sliding the slim plastic across the kitchen table. "Books, supplies, whatever you need for school." Dad nodded from behind his newspaper. "Don't go crazy. But you're covered." I was 18, eager to prove I could be responsible. I used the card exactly as intended. Textbooks for my accounting courses, a second-hand laptop from the campus tech sale, notebooks, calculators. Nothing frivolous. The total over 3 months came to $1,200. When the statement arrived, Dad exploded. I remember the dining room, the chandelier above us, the way Mom's face went pale as Dad slammed the paper on the table. $1,200? He was standing now, veins visible in his neck. "Who gave you permission to spend this much?" "You did," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "You said it was for school supplies." "I said necessities, not a shopping spree." "Gerald," Mom murmured. "The books were expensive this semester." "Stay out of this, Diane." He turned back to me, eyes cold. "You'll pay back every cent, every single cent, or you can find somewhere else to live." I worked 2 part-time jobs for 8 months, campus library and weekend shifts at a coffee shop. I paid back every dollar, kept every receipt, documented every payment. The debt wasn't the only cost. Working 25 hours a week meant I couldn't take full course loads. I had to stretch my degree over 6 years instead of 4. 2 extra years of tuition Dad refused to help with, 2 extra years of commuting from home, 2 extra years of being reminded I was a burden. I thought it was over. I thought he'd forget, but my father had a long memory, and he knew how to weaponize it. Mom found me crying in my room that night. She sat on the edge of my bed, stroked my hair, and said, "Your father just wants to teach you the value of money. He loves you. Don't be angry." I wanted to believe her. That was my mistake. The only person who ever made me feel like I mattered was my grandmother. Margaret Hayes wasn't soft. She'd built a chain of furniture stores from nothing, started with a single showroom in 1972, expanded to 11 locations across the state, then sold the whole operation when she turned 65 and retired with enough money to never worry again. She was sharp, practical, and she saw things other people missed, including what was happening in her daughter's marriage. I spent summers with Grandma Margaret when I was young. Her house smelled like lavender and old books. She taught me to read financial statements before I was 12, showed me how compound interest worked using her own investment portfolios. "Knowledge is freedom, Ingrid," she'd say, tapping her temple. "No one can take what's in here." She watched my father carefully during family gatherings. I noticed the way her eyes narrowed when he dismissed my opinions, the way her jaw tightened when Marcus got praised and I got ignored. One afternoon, I was 15, we were sitting on her porch watching the sunset over her garden. Out of nowhere, she took my hand. "Ingrid," she said quietly, "I want you to remember something." I looked at her. Her eyes were serious in a way I hadn't seen before. "I've already prepared for your future. When the time comes, you'll know." "Prepared what, Grandma?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your father can't control everything. Neither can your mother. Someday you'll need help they won't give you. When that day comes, you'll be ready." I didn't understand what she meant. I was 15. I thought she was being dramatic. 3 years ago, Grandma Margaret passed away. She was 78. I didn't know then that she'd left me something far more valuable than money. She'd left me a way out. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting, 3.9 GPA, Dean's List every semester. A professor who'd worked at Deloitte wrote me a glowing recommendation letter. For the first time in my life, I had something that belonged to me, credentials no one could dismiss. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in May. I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, and scanned the crowd for my family. They were there, but they weren't watching me. Dad and Mom flanked Marcus in the third row. He'd driven down to support me, but the three of them were deep in conversation, heads together, laughing about something. When my name was called, only Grandma's empty seat in my heart acknowledged the moment. Afterward, Dad found me outside the auditorium. "Nice job," he said, in the tone he used for the mailman. "Listen, I've got a proposition. Come work at the company. We need someone to handle the books." My heart lifted for a second. Maybe he finally saw my value. "The position is unpaid for the first year," he continued. "Consider it an apprenticeship. You'll live at home, help your mother, learn the business. In a few years, when Marcus takes over, you'll be useful." Unpaid, living at home. Useful to my brother. I took a breath. "I appreciate the offer, Dad, but I'd like to try finding work on my own first. Get some outside experience." His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes went cold. "Fine," he said softly. "Try it your way." He turned and walked back to the car, where Mom and Marcus were waiting. None of them looked back. I stood alone in the parking lot, still holding my diploma, and told myself I'd made the right choice. I had no idea that his silence was a declaration of war. The rejection letters started coming within weeks. First, the accounting firm downtown, Miller and Associates. I'd interviewed beautifully. The hiring manager had smiled, shaken my hand, said they'd be in touch soon. 2 days later, "We've decided to go with another candidate." I applied to the regional bank next. Same thing. Great interview, warm reception, then silence followed by a form email, then the insurance company, the property management firm, the medical billing office, the credit union, 15 applications, 15 interviews, 15 rejections. I started doubting myself. Maybe my resume wasn't strong enough. Maybe I'd said something wrong. Maybe I was overestimating my abilities. I spent nights revising my cover letters, practicing interview answers in the mirror, reading career advice blogs until my eyes burned. Nothing changed. One afternoon, I walked into Patterson Financial Services for what felt like my 20th interview. The HR manager, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, listened to my answers, nodded along, and then paused. She looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. "Miss Thornton," she said slowly, "I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't." My stomach tightened. "You seem like a lovely young woman. Qualified, professional." She hesitated. "But I think you should talk to your father." "My father? Why?" She pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable. "I can't say more than that. Just ask him. Ask him why no one in this town will hire you." She stood, signaling the interview was over. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. A cold certainty was forming in my chest, something I didn't want to believe. But I had to know. That night, I confronted my father, and what he told me changed everything. I found him in his study, sitting behind the mahogany desk he'd imported from England. A glass of scotch sweated on a leather coaster beside him. "Dad, I need to talk to you." He didn't look up from his papers. "Make it quick." "Why can't I get a job?" That made him look up. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth, and in that moment, I knew. "You called them," I whispered. "You called all of them." He leaned back in his chair, swirling his scotch. "I told them the truth." "What truth?" "That you're a thief." He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "That you stole $1,200 from your own family. That you can't be trusted with money." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I paid that back. Every cent. You know I paid that back." "Did you?" He shrugged. "That's not how I remember it." "Dad," my voice cracked. "Those were textbooks. You said I could—" "What I remember," he interrupted, "is my daughter stealing from me. And I think potential employers deserve to know what kind of person they'd be hiring." My mother appeared in the doorway, twisting her hands. Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or the ghost of the woman she used to be before 30 years with Gerald wore her down. "Gerald, maybe we should—" "Diane, this is between me and Ingrid." She flinched. For a split second her eyes met mine, and I saw it. She knew this was wrong. She knew. But she looked away, retreating into silence like she always did. That hurt almost more than Dad's cruelty. He was a monster. She was a witness who chose not to see. I stared at him, tears burning behind my eyes. "Why? Why would you do this to me?" He stood slowly, walked around the desk and stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath. "Because you needed to learn respect," he said quietly. "You turned down my offer. You thought you could make it without this family. Without me," he smiled. "Maybe now you understand. You can't." "Come home," Mom said softly from the doorway. "Work for your father. This can all go away." I looked between them, my mother's pleading face, my father's cold satisfaction, and I understood. This wasn't about respect. This was about control. In a small town, gossip travels faster than truth. Within weeks, I felt the shift everywhere I went. At the grocery store, neighbors who'd known me since childhood suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. At church, conversations stopped when I walked past. The woman at the dry cleaner, who'd always asked about my studies, started treating me like a stranger. The whispers were everywhere. "Did you hear about Gerald's daughter?" Such a shame. The family's devastated. They tried to help her, you know. She just wouldn't listen. My father had been strategic. He hadn't just called employers. He'd seeded the story throughout his network. Golf buddies, Chamber of Commerce colleagues, neighbors at dinner parties. The narrative was always the same. Troubled daughter, theft problem, family trying to cope. He never lied outright. He just told his version. And in a town where Thornton Construction had built half the commercial buildings, his version was the only one that mattered. Marcus made it worse. I ran into him at the coffee shop one morning, one of my old part-time jobs. He was with friends, guys I vaguely recognized from his fraternity days. "Hey, little sister," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still looking for work? I heard Dad might have an opening." "Oh, wait," he laughed. "You'd probably steal from the register." His friends snickered. I left my coffee on the counter and walked out, face burning. At home that night, I looked at my bank account. $3,000 in savings. Rent was due in 2 weeks on my tiny studio apartment. I had maybe 2 months before I'd be completely broke. 2 months before I'd have no choice but to crawl back to my father's house and accept whatever crumbs he offered. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. The Willow Inn sat on the edge of town, a modest hotel that mostly served traveling salesmen and families visiting the nearby state park. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hiring. The job listing said, housekeeping staff needed, no experience necessary. No experience necessary, no references required. I applied online at 2 a.m. when the shame felt less sharp. 2 days later, I was standing in the employee break room, filling out paperwork. The manager was a woman named Linda Crawford, mid-40s, no nonsense, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen plenty of hard luck stories walk through her door. She looked at my application, then at me. Accounting degree, she said flatly. GPA 3.9, and you want to clean hotel rooms? Yes, ma'am. Why? I could have lied, made up something about wanting experience in hospitality. But I was so tired of lies. Because no one else will hire me, I said, and I need to eat. She studied me for a long moment. I wondered if she'd heard the rumors, if she'd call my father for a reference and this door would slam shut too. Instead, she nodded once. I don't care what people say about you, Miss Thornton. I care whether you show up on time and do your job. She slid a uniform across the desk, pale blue polyester, the kind that wrinkles if you look at it wrong. Shift starts at 6 a.m. Don't be late. I took the uniform with hands that weren't quite steady. Thank you, I managed. You won't regret this. She almost smiled. We'll see. Minimum wage, night shifts, scrubbing toilets and changing sheets, while people who used to respect me pretended not to see me in the hallways. But it was work. It was survival, and my father couldn't touch it. 6 months into my housekeeping job, my family decided to have dinner at the Willow Inn. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. It was a Friday evening. I was pushing my supply cart down the service corridor when I heard a familiar laugh, my father's booming, self-satisfied bark that I'd learned to dread. I froze, pressed myself against the wall, peeked around the corner. There they were, being seated in the hotel restaurant, Dad in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, Mom in pearls, Marcus checking his phone, bored already. The hostess was leading them to a window table, right in my sight line. I should have stayed hidden. I should have switched floors, asked another housekeeper to cover. But before I could move, my father's eyes found me. The cart, the uniform, the yellow rubber gloves on my hands. His face split into the widest grin I'd ever seen. Well, well, he nudged my mother, pointed directly at me. Diane, look, our daughter found her calling. Mom's face flickered, shame maybe, or something else I couldn't read. Marcus just laughed. Hey, Ingrid, my brother called across the restaurant, loud enough for every guest to hear. Missed a spot in room 204. Several diners turned to look. Some recognized me. I saw the whispers start. I stood there in my wrinkled polyester uniform, holding a toilet brush, while my family watched from their white tablecloth table with their crystal water glasses and their Rolex watches. My father raised his wine glass toward me in a mock toast. Maybe now, he said, just loud enough to carry, you'll finally learn to respect us. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just turned around and pushed my cart back down the corridor. But something hardened inside me that night. I remembered what Grandma had said. When the time comes, you'll know. When, I wondered. When? 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, I was cleaning out a box of old things from my closet, trying to sell whatever I could to make rent, when I found my old phone. The screen was cracked, battery dead. I'd upgraded a year ago and forgotten about it. For some reason, I plugged it in. The phone buzzed to life, and notifications flooded the screen. Old texts from college friends I'd lost touch with, spam emails, and one voicemail. From 3 years ago, right after Grandma died. I pressed play, heart suddenly pounding. Miss Thornton, this is Walter Henderson from Henderson and Associates Law Firm. The voice was professional, measured. I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Hayes. There are some documents pertaining to her will that require your attention. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. The message ended. 2 years. I'd missed this call 2 years ago. I remembered that time, the fog of grief after Grandma's funeral. I hadn't been checking messages. I'd assumed her estate was straightforward. Dad had told us she'd left everything to charity, with small gifts for each grandchild. Nothing significant, he'd said dismissively. Your grandmother was always sentimental. I'd believed him. I grabbed my current phone and dialed the law firm. A receptionist answered. Henderson and Associates, how may I direct your call? I'm trying to reach Walter Henderson. He contacted me about my grandmother's estate. Margaret Hayes? A pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson retired last year due to health issues. His cases were transferred to various attorneys. Another pause, keyboard clicking. I see a note here that Mr. Henderson attempted to reach you multiple times. The file indicates the calls went unanswered and your father, Gerald Thornton, eventually contacted the office and said you weren't interested in pursuing the matter. My blood ran cold. My father said what? I'm just reading the notes, ma'am. It says family representative confirmed beneficiary declined further contact. Dad had intercepted it. He'd told them I wasn't interested. Can you tell me where the case was transferred? I'd need to check our records. Can you leave your number? Transferred where? To whom? I'd need to check our records. Can you leave your number? I gave her my information, but something told me I wouldn't hear back. The trail had gone cold. But now I knew. There was something in Grandma's estate that Dad hadn't told me about. Something he didn't want me to find. A month later, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something, maybe desperation, maybe hope that things could still change, made me pick up. Ingrid. His voice was warm, too warm. How are you? Fine, Dad. Listen, I've been thinking. This has gone on long enough. Your mother misses you. I miss you. He paused. Come home. I stared at the water stain on my ceiling, the one I couldn't afford to fix. Come home and do what? Work at the company. We need help with bookkeeping. I'll pay you. Not much at first, but something. You'll live with us, save money, get back on your feet. It sounded almost reasonable. Almost. And the job hunting? The things you told everyone about me? Water under the bridge. Come home and I'll make some calls, clear things up. And if I don't? His tone shifted. The warmth drained out like someone had pulled a plug. Then you can keep scrubbing toilets until you wise up. Your choice. I closed my eyes. I need to think about it. Don't think too long. This offer won't last forever. He hung up. That night, my mother called separately, her voice soft, pleading. Please, Ingrid, just come home. Stop being stubborn. Your father only wants what's best for you. Does he, Mom? Or does he just want to control me? That's unfair. He's your father. He loves you in his own way. His way is destroying my life. Silence. Then quietly, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I hung up without saying goodbye. Marcus texted an hour later. Just give up already, sis. You're embarrassing yourself and us. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started applying to jobs outside our town, far outside, places where the Thornton name meant nothing. I had to escape. 2 weeks later, I learned exactly what my father had planned for me. I was working the late shift at the Willow Inn, restocking supplies in the second-floor closet, when voices drifted from the restaurant below. The ventilation ducts carried sound in strange ways, a design flaw I'd learned to ignore. But then I heard my father's name, and then I heard mine. I crept closer to the vent, pressing my ear against the metal grate. Tell you, Richard, it's perfect timing. Dad's voice, jovial, confident. Your son's looking to settle down. My daughter needs stability. Merge the families, merge the businesses. Thornton Construction and Palmer Plumbing. We dominate the county. A second voice, older, gruff. She's the one who's been causing trouble? The theft thing? That's handled. She's almost ready to come home. Another few months of this, Dad laughed. And she'll agree to anything, including meeting your boy. My blood turned to ice. So what, an arranged marriage? I prefer strategic alliance. But yes, she'll do what she's told. By the time I'm done, She won't have any other options. The other man chuckled. Gerald, you're a piece of work. All right, let's talk numbers. Their conversation shifted to business details. I didn't hear any of it. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor of the supply closet, surrounded by toilet paper and bleach, my heart hammering against my ribs. He wasn't just trying to control me. He was planning to sell me. A business arrangement. A merger sealed with his daughter's future. I thought about Grandma Margaret, her warning, her promise that she'd prepared something. I didn't know what she'd left me or how to find it, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could not stay in this town, no matter what it cost me. I started applying to companies in cities I'd never visited, places where my father's influence couldn't reach. Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, anywhere far enough that a small-town construction company owner's gossip wouldn't matter. The rejections piled up. Some companies wanted references I couldn't provide. Others questioned the 2-year gap in my employment history. How do you explain my father sabotaged my career because I wouldn't be his unpaid servant? I tried honesty a few times. It never went well. That sounds like a complicated family situation, one HR manager said diplomatically, which was corporate speak for we don't want your drama. After weeks of nothing, I'd almost given up hope. Then the email arrived. Subject: interview. Invitation: Mercer Holdings. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it was real. Dear Ms. Thornton, we have reviewed your application and would like to invite you for an in-person interview at our headquarters. Please note that this interview will be conducted by our CEO, Mr. Daniel Mercer, personally. This is an unusual request, but Mr. Mercer has expressed specific interest in meeting with you. Please confirm your availability. Mercer Holdings. I'd applied on a whim. They were the largest financial firm in 3 states, way above my experience level. I'd never expected a response. And the CEO wanted to meet me personally? That didn't make sense. CEOs didn't interview entry-level accountants. I almost deleted the email, convinced it was spam or some cruel joke. But something made me pause. Grandma's voice in my head. When the time comes, you'll know. I hit reply before I could talk myself out of it. Dear Sir or Madam, I'm available at your earliest convenience. 2 days later, I was on a bus to the city, wearing a second-hand navy suit I'd found at Goodwill, with $47 in my pocket and no idea what was waiting for me. The night before my interview, I stayed in a budget motel near the bus station. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. The mattress sagged in the middle, but it was clean, and it was mine, and tomorrow might change everything. I hung my Goodwill suit in the bathroom, letting the steam from the shower work out the wrinkles. I polished my only pair of heels, black, scuffed at the toes, but presentable if no one looked too close. I practiced interview answers until midnight. Tell me about yourself. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting. I'm detail-oriented, hardworking, and eager to contribute to a team that values integrity. Why do you want to work at Mercer Holdings? Your company's reputation for ethical financial practices aligns with my personal values. I want to grow with an organization that does things right. Why the 2-year gap in your employment? That one I practiced 10 different ways. None of them felt right. Linda, my manager at the hotel, had given me the day off without question. Go get your life back, she'd said, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into my hand. You don't belong here, Ingrid. You never did. I'd cried in the break room. She'd pretended not to notice. As I lay in that motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I thought about Grandma, about her promise, about the lawyer's call I'd missed. What had she left me? Why did this CEO want to meet me personally? I fell asleep with questions circling my mind like restless birds. In the morning, I put on my second-hand suit, took a deep breath, and walked toward whatever was waiting. I didn't know it yet, but Grandma was about to keep her promise. Before I tell you what happened at Mercer Holdings, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? If this story is bringing up memories for you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to know what was in that envelope, the one my grandmother left 15 years ago, keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The morning of my interview, my phone rang. I was walking toward the Mercer Holdings building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that made me feel very small in my Goodwill suit. When I saw the caller ID, Dad. My thumb hovered over the ignore button, but something made me answer. Ingrid. His voice was flat, cold. I hear you have an interview today. My stomach dropped. How do you know that? Marcus follows your little social media accounts. Very careless of you, tagging your location at the bus station, buying a ticket to the city. He did some digging, figured out which companies you'd applied to. I'd made one post, one cautiously optimistic Instagram story about new beginnings. I hadn't mentioned Mercer Holdings by name, but I'd tagged the bus station. Marcus must have checked which financial firms were in that city, cross-referenced with job postings. Stupid. So stupid. It doesn't matter, Dad. This is none of your... I know people in finance, Ingrid. The industry is smaller than you think. He let that hang in the air. One phone call. That's all it takes. You wouldn't? Try me. Or better yet, come home now and stop this foolishness. Last chance. I was standing on the sidewalk, 50 feet from the building that might save my life, and my father was trying to burn it down from 300 miles away. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You're done, sis. Dad already called them. Enjoy the bus ride home. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I looked up at the Mercer Holdings tower. 26 floors of glass reflecting the morning sun. Maybe he'd already poisoned this well, too. Maybe I was walking into another rejection. Another door slammed in my face, but I'd come too far to turn back. I silenced my phone, straightened my second-hand suit, and walked through the front door. Whatever was waiting for me, I'd face it standing up. The lobby of Mercer Holdings was everything my life wasn't. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a 3-story atrium with modern art installations suspended from cables, men and women in designer suits crossing purposefully toward elevators, their heels clicking in sharp rhythms. I approached the reception desk, acutely aware of my scuffed shoes and second-hand blazer. Ingrid Thornton, I have an interview. The receptionist, blonde, immaculate, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent, typed something into her computer. Then she looked up with an expression I couldn't read. Yes, Miss Thornton, you're expected. A pause. Mr. Mercer will see you personally in his office, 26th floor. The CEO's office? That's correct. She handed me a visitor badge. Take the private elevator on your left. His assistant will meet you. I walked toward the elevator in a daze. This didn't make sense. CEOs didn't conduct entry-level interviews. There had to be a mistake. Or my father's call had worked, and this was some elaborate humiliation I couldn't see coming. The elevator rose silently, 26 floors in what felt like seconds. The doors opened onto a reception area that screamed money. Original artwork on the walls, furniture that looked handcrafted, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city that made my breath catch. An assistant in a charcoal dress approached. Miss Thornton, Mr. Mercer is waiting. She led me down a hallway lined with photographs, the history of the company, I guessed, and stopped at a heavy oak door. Go right in, she said, and something in her voice sounded almost kind. He's been expecting you for a long time. Expecting me? I pushed open the door, and everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart. Daniel Mercer was standing by the window when I entered. He was older than I expected, early 50s, silver at his temples, the kind of face that belonged on the cover of financial magazines. His suit was impeccable. His office was the size of my entire apartment, but what struck me most was his expression. He wasn't looking at me like a job candidate. He was looking at me like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Miss Thornton. His voice was warm. Please, sit down. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my heart hammering. Mr. Mercer, I'm not sure why. He held up a hand. Before we begin, I need to give you something. He walked to a safe built into the wall, a vintage Mosler, polished brass, and entered a combination. This should explain everything. He pulled out a yellowed envelope. I couldn't move. The envelope was thick, sealed with wax that had aged to amber. On the front, in handwriting I would recognize anywhere, were the words, "Only to be opened when Margaret Hayes has passed away and her granddaughter Ingrid Thornton comes for an interview at Mercer Holdings." The date beneath it, 15 years ago. I was 11 when she wrote this. Your grandmother. Daniel said softly, placing it in my trembling hands, was the first person who ever believed in me. 20 years ago, I was nobody. A kid with a business plan and no money. Margaret Hayes wrote me a check for $200,000 when every bank in the state had said no. She made me promise one thing, he continued. She said, "Someday a young woman named Ingrid Thornton will need a job. She might apply to your company. When she does, and she will, give her this envelope." I set up a flag in our HR system 15 years ago. Your name, your social security number. The moment your application came through, I was notified. 15 years. He'd been waiting 15 years for an application that might never come. Tears were blurring my vision. She told me, "Someday my granddaughter will need a safe place. When she comes to you, and she will, give her this." I didn't understand then. He paused. "I understand now." "Grandma," I whispered, staring at the envelope. She'd known. 15 years ago, she'd known. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I broke the wax seal. Daniel stepped back, giving me space. The office was silent except for the soft rustle of old paper. Inside were 3 items. First, a letter, handwritten on cream-colored stationery, Grandma's elegant script flowing across the pages. Second, a certificate, official, notarized, bearing the Mercer Holdings logo and a date from 20 years ago. I scanned the text and felt the room tilt. Certificate of stock ownership, Ingrid Marie Thornton, shares, 8% founding stake. Mercer Holdings, LLC. I read it twice, 3 times. "I don't understand," I whispered. Daniel pulled up a chair beside me. "When your grandmother invested in my company, she didn't want the shares in her name. She put them in trust for you, her then 6-year-old granddaughter. Legally, irrevocably yours." "But why didn't anyone tell me?" "The trust was structured to remain silent until either Margaret passed away or you came to this company seeking employment, whichever came first. She designed it that way." He paused. "She wanted to make sure no one could take it from you, not even your father." The third item, a small leather journal, its pages yellowed and soft with age. I opened it. Inside were notes, dates and observations spanning decades. October 1998. Gerald screamed at Diane about household spending. Diane cried for 2 hours. March 2002. Gerald refused to pay for Ingrid's piano lessons, called them a waste of money for a girl. June 2008. Gerald forbade Ingrid from applying to out-of-state colleges. Women don't need fancy degrees. Page after page, she'd been watching, documenting, preparing. "Your grandmother knew," Daniel said quietly, "exactly what kind of man your father is. She couldn't stop him directly, so she built you an escape route." I was crying now, couldn't stop. She'd loved me this much. Daniel offered me a glass of water and stepped outside to give me privacy. I sat alone in his office, holding my grandmother's letter like it was made of glass. "My dearest Ingrid, if you're reading this, then I've left this world and you found your way here. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to give you this myself. I want you to understand why I did what I did. I watched your mother marry Gerald Thornton. I saw the signs from the beginning, the control, the cruelty disguised as discipline, the way he diminished everyone around him to feel powerful. I begged Diane to leave. She refused. She believed she could fix him. I couldn't save my daughter, but I swore I would save you. From the moment you were born, I saw something in you, a spark Gerald couldn't extinguish. You questioned him. You dreamed beyond his walls, and I knew with absolute certainty that one day he would try to break you for it. So I built you an insurance policy. Daniel Mercer was a young man with a vision when I invested in his company. I put those shares in your name because I knew that Gerald would one day try to trap you, and I wanted you to have a door he couldn't close. By now, those shares are worth more than enough to build your own life. Use them wisely. Build something that belongs to you. And remember this, sweet girl. You don't owe anyone your obedience, not even family, especially not family that treats love like a leash. I am so proud of the woman you've become. Even if I can't see it, I know it's true. Live free, Ingrid. That's all I ever wanted for you. All my love, forever, Grandma. I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. When Daniel returned, I had composed myself. Mostly. My eyes were red, my mascara was ruined, but something inside me felt lighter than it had in years. I have to tell you something, he said, settling back into his chair. Your father called me this morning. I went cold. What did he say? The same thing he's apparently told everyone, that you're a thief, that you stole from your family, that I shouldn't trust you. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but I saw something flash in his eyes. He was very confident, very persuasive. And you? I listened. He folded his hands. And then I looked at the journal your grandmother left, at her documentation of his behavior spanning 30 years. He met my gaze. And then I looked at the certificate that proves you own 8% of my company. I stared at him. Miss Thornton, Ingrid, your father just tried to slander a shareholder of Mercer Holdings, one of our founding stakeholders, in fact. A small smile crossed his face. I don't think he's accustomed to that kind of miscalculation. He doesn't know, I whispered, about the shares, about any of this. No, your grandmother was very specific about that. The trust was sealed. Your name doesn't appear in any public filings. It's held through a legal entity. There was no way for him to discover it. So when he called you, he was trying to sabotage someone who, on paper, is technically one of my bosses. Daniel leaned back. I have to admit, I've never experienced anything quite like it. I thought about my father, smugly confident that he'd destroyed my last chance, about Marcus's gloating text. They had no idea what was coming. For the first time in 2 years, I smiled. Daniel leaned forward. There's something I'd like to propose. I wiped my eyes, still clutching Grandma's letter. I'm listening. Next week, Mercer Holdings hosts its annual charity gala. It's our biggest event. Clients, investors, community leaders. He paused. Your father will be there. My stomach clenched. He's invited? He invited himself, actually. He's been trying to network his way into contracts with us for months. Seems to think his construction company would make a good partner. Daniel's tone was dry. I've been politely declining. So, what are you proposing? I'd like to introduce you at the gala. As our new senior financial analyst, a position you're more than qualified for, and as a founding shareholder of the company. He watched my face carefully. Your father will be in the room when he learns who you really are. I was quiet for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to picture Gerald's face when he realized his daughter, the one he'd tried to destroy, owned a piece of the company he'd been courting. But another part of me hesitated. I don't want revenge, I said slowly. I don't want to humiliate him just to see him suffer. That's not... I searched for the words. That's not who I want to be. Daniel nodded, unsurprised. Your grandmother said you'd say that. He smiled gently. This isn't about revenge, Ingrid. It's about truth. You've spent 2 years being called a thief, a failure, a disgrace. Your father controls that narrative because no one's challenged it. He stood, walked to the window. The gala isn't about hurting him. It's about standing in the light. Let people see who you really are, and let your father's lies collapse under their own weight. I thought about it, and then I said yes. Can you imagine what's going to happen at that gala? My father spent 2 years destroying my reputation, and he has no idea that my grandmother planned for this moment 15 years ago. If you're watching this and thinking of someone who needs to hear this story, someone stuck in a controlling family, someone who's been made to feel worthless, share this video with them, and comment Team Ingrid if you're still with me. I want to know who's here. The Grand Meridian Hotel looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers dripped from 30-foot ceilings. A live jazz quartet played in the corner. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and canapes. The guest list read like a who's who of regional business: executives, politicians, philanthropists, old money, and new. I watched from a private room upstairs, waiting for my cue. The PR team at Mercer Holdings had dressed me. Nothing ostentatious. A simple navy sheath dress by Oscar de la Renta, elegant but understated. Pearl earrings, my hair in a sleek chignon. I looked professional, competent. I didn't look like someone who'd been scrubbing hotel toilets 3 days ago. Through the window, I spotted my family. Gerald entered first, chest puffed, surveying the room like he owned it. His charcoal Armani suit probably cost what I used to make in 3 months at the hotel. Mom trailed behind in Chanel, smiling her perfect smile. Marcus was checking his phone, looking bored. They didn't belong here, but they thought they did. I watched my father work the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud. He was trying to catch Daniel's eye, positioning himself strategically, the construction deal he'd been chasing. He had no idea that in 20 minutes, everything would change. Ready? Daniel's assistant appeared beside me. I took a deep breath, touched Grandma's letter in my clutch. Ready. Mr. Mercer will introduce you after his opening remarks. You'll enter through the side door. She paused, studying my face. For what it's worth, everyone in this company knows what your father did, what he tried to do, and we're glad you're here. My throat tightened. Thank you. She nodded and disappeared. I stood alone, watching the crowd below, counting the minutes until I could finally stand in the truth. I couldn't hear the conversation from my vantage point, but I could see it unfold. Gerald had cornered Daniel near the bar. My father was leaning in, all practiced charm, gesturing broadly. Daniel stood with his hands clasped, expression neutral, occasionally nodding. Then another executive joined them, a woman I recognized from the company website. Rachel something, Chief Operations Officer. She asked Gerald something. He beamed, puffed up even more, and then I could read the body language even from upstairs. He started talking about his family, his son, the heir, the perfect Marcus, and then his face shifted, something darker. He was talking about someone else now, me. I saw Rachel's expression change, polite interest turning to confusion. She glanced at Daniel. Daniel said something back. Gerald laughed, the hollow, confident laugh of a man who thought he was winning. He was telling them about his troubled daughter, the thief, the disappointment. Rachel looked uncomfortable. She excused herself, moving away quickly. But Gerald kept talking to Daniel, kept spinning his story, kept building the narrative he'd crafted so carefully over 2 years. My mother stood nearby, nodding along, the perfect supportive wife. Marcus was at the bar, flirting with someone's daughter, oblivious. This was my family. This was what they did. I felt the old shame rise in my chest, the familiar burn of being reduced, dismissed, defined by someone else's lies. But it was different now, because now I had something they didn't know about. Now I had the truth. Miss Thornton? The assistant was back. Mr. Mercer is beginning his remarks. You'll be introduced in 5 minutes. I smoothed my dress, touched Grandma's letter one more time. 5 minutes until Gerald Thornton learned who his daughter really was. Daniel took the microphone as the crowd gathered. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Mercer Holdings' annual charity gala. I couldn't hear most of his speech through the door, just fragments about community, philanthropy, gratitude for partnerships built over 20 years. Then his voice shifted. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce someone special. Someone who represents the values this company was built on: integrity, perseverance, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. The assistant touched my arm. That's your cue. I stepped through the side door and into the ballroom. 200 faces turned toward me. I walked steadily, head high, toward the small stage where Daniel waited. My heels clicked against the marble floor. The navy dress caught the light from the chandeliers. I didn't look at my father. Not yet. But I felt the moment he saw me. A sharp intake of breath somewhere to my left. A muttered curse. The crash of a champagne flute shattering. That was Marcus. I kept walking. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel continued, his voice warm and clear, please welcome Mercer Holdings' newest senior financial analyst and someone very dear to this company's history, Miss Ingrid Thornton. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I reached the stage. Daniel shook my hand, leaning close to murmur, "You're doing great." I turned to face the audience. And finally, I let myself look at my father. Gerald stood frozen near the bar, face white, mouth open. My mother had grabbed his arm, her knuckles bloodless. Marcus was staring at the broken glass at his feet like he didn't understand how it got there. I smiled. Not vindictive, not cruel, just calm. Thank you, I said into the microphone. It's an honor to be here. And then my father started moving toward me, face twisted with rage. Ingrid! My father's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. He pushed past a waiter, nearly knocking a tray of champagne to the floor. What the hell do you think you're doing here? The room went quiet. 200 people watched Gerald Thornton storm toward the stage, his face mottled with fury. Security, he barked, looking around wildly. Someone get security. This woman shouldn't be here. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying. Mr. Thornton, I'd suggest you lower your voice. You don't understand, Gerald sputtered, pointing at me. She's a thief. I told you this morning. She stole from her own family. She's not qualified to... Not qualified? Daniel's eyebrow rose. Mr. Thornton, I'm well aware of Miss Thornton's qualifications. You can't possibly... I'm also aware that you've spent the past 2 years contacting every employer in your county to destroy your daughter's career. I'm aware that the theft you reference was $1,200 in textbooks that she paid back in full. Daniel's voice hardened slightly. And I'm aware that you've been trying to force your daughter into an arranged marriage to secure a business partnership. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Gerald's face went from red to white. How do you... Your daughter, Daniel continued, is not just an employee of Mercer Holdings. He paused, letting the silence build. Ingrid Thornton owns 8% of this company. She's been a founding shareholder since she was 6 years old. He turned to me. Her grandmother, Margaret Hayes, invested in this company before anyone else believed in it, and she put those shares in Ingrid's name to protect her from people exactly like you. The room erupted in whispers. I looked at my father. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. My father found his voice. This is a scam, he shouted, looking around the room for allies. This is fraud. My mother-in-law was senile. These documents can't be... The documents have been verified by 3 independent attorneys, Daniel said calmly. Notarized, sealed, and filed with the state. There's no ambiguity, Mr. Thornton. I'll sue. Gerald was sweating now, his carefully constructed image crumbling. I'll sue this entire company for... For what? Daniel's voice was soft, but it carried. For honoring a legal investment made 20 years ago? My mother had pushed through the crowd to reach my father. Gerald! She hissed, tugging at his sleeve. Everyone is watching. Please! He shook her off violently. You! He pointed at me, finger trembling. You ungrateful little, after everything I did for you. I raised you. I fed you. And this is how you repay me? I said nothing. I destroyed your career because you needed to learn respect. His voice cracked. You needed to understand that family comes first, that daughters don't defy their fathers. The room was dead silent now, every eye on Gerald Thornton, every ear hearing exactly what kind of man he was. I made you clean toilets, he screamed. I made sure no one would hire you, and you know what? I'd do it again, because that's what happens when you disobey. That's what you deserve. Marcus stepped forward, face pale, trying to salvage what was left of the family's reputation. Dad, stop, we should go. This isn't the place. No! Gerald shoved him back so hard, Marcus stumbled into a waiter. I saw my brother's expression shift, from embarrassment to something darker. He'd spent his whole life being the golden child, the heir, the one who did everything right, and now he was watching his father self-destruct in front of every business contact he'd ever need. For the first time, Marcus looked at Dad the way I'd always seen him. She's nothing. She's always been nothing. Her grandmother was a meddling old fool, and her shares don't change what she is, a thief and a failure and a disgrace to this family. He was panting now, face purple, spittle at the corners of his mouth. No one was looking at me anymore. They were all looking at him. And they finally saw what I'd always known. The ballroom was silent. 200 people, executives, politicians, philanthropists, staring at my father as he stood there, heaving, having just screamed that I deserved to scrub toilets for daring to disobey him. I stepped forward to the microphone. I didn't come here tonight to humiliate anyone. My voice was steady. I didn't come here for revenge. Gerald glared at me, but he'd spent his ammunition. He had nothing left. I came here because I spent 2 years being called a thief, a failure, a disgrace. I was blacklisted from every job in my county. I was mocked for working the only job I could get. I was told that if I wanted to survive, I had to surrender my freedom to a man who saw me as property. I looked at my father, not with anger, not with hatred, just clarity. The $1,200 my father calls theft was money he gave me to buy textbooks. I paid back every cent. I have every receipt. I paused. But even if I hadn't, even if I'd made a mistake, does that justify 2 years of sabotage? Does that justify trying to arrange my marriage to seal a business deal? Murmurs in the crowd. My grandmother saw what I couldn't. She knew what kind of man my father was. She couldn't save my mother, but she found a way to save me. Not with magic, not with luck, with planning, with legal documents, with love that looked ahead. I turned back to Gerald. Dad, I don't hate you, but I'm done. I'm done seeking your approval. I'm done accepting your definition of my worth. My voice didn't waver. This is my boundary. I wish you well, but I will not let you control my life anymore. I stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. My family left the gala without another word. I watched them go. Dad storming toward the exit, face purple. Mom hurrying after him, head down. Marcus trailing behind, staring at his phone like he could disappear into it. No one stopped them. No one tried to make polite conversation. 200 people watched Gerald Thornton leave in silence. After they were gone, the room seemed to exhale. The jazz quartet started up again. Conversations resumed, quieter than before. Then something unexpected happened. A woman approached me, 50s, elegant, wearing a string of pearls that probably cost more than my old apartment. I recognized her from my job searches. HR director at Patterson Financial. The one who'd told me to talk to my father. Miss Thornton. Her voice was soft with shame. I owe you an apology. A significant one. It's all right. It's not. She pressed a business card into my hand. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to discuss opportunities. Real ones, without your father's interference. She moved away before I could respond. Then another person approached. Then another. Business cards, handshakes, quiet apologies. I'm so sorry, I believed. If I'd known the truth, your grandmother would be so proud. Daniel appeared at my side, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. How are you holding up? I don't know, I admitted. I think I'm still processing. He smiled gently. The shares, by the way, at current valuation, they're worth approximately $2.4 million. You'll want to meet with our legal team, but it's yours. Free and clear. 2.4 million. I couldn't even comprehend that number. Also, Daniel added, your new office will be ready Monday, if you're still interested in the analyst position. I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Yes, I said, I'm interested. 1 month later, my life looked completely different. I had a corner office on the 14th floor of Mercer Holdings. Not the biggest office, I was still junior in experience, but it had a window with a view of the city skyline, and my nameplate was on the door. I had an apartment, small, but mine. A 1-bedroom in a building with a doorman and a gym I never used. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table because I could afford them now. I had colleagues who respected my work, a boss who valued my contributions, a career that belonged to me. The news about Gerald had spread through the business community like wildfire. 3 major contracts had been canceled within weeks of the gala. Partners who didn't want to associate with a man who'd publicly admitted to sabotaging his own daughter. His company was still standing, but smaller, diminished. Mom called once. Can you forgive us? She asked, voice small. Can we be a family again? I forgive you, Mom. And I meant it. The anger had faded into something quieter. But I'm not coming back. I can't live under those conditions again. She cried. I listened. When she hung up, I felt sad, but not guilty. Marcus texted an apology. Generic, probably drafted by a PR consultant. I responded with, thank you, and nothing else. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something. Maybe not. Gerald never reached out. I didn't expect him to. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Grandma Margaret was buried, brought her favorite flowers, yellow roses, and sat by her headstone. "You saved me," I said softly. "You saw it coming, and you saved me." The wind rustled through the trees. "I'll make you proud, Grandma. I promise." I sat there until the sun went down, feeling for the first time in years completely free. Sometimes I take out Grandma's letter and read it again. "Live free, Ingrid. That's all I ever wanted for you." She couldn't have known exactly how things would unfold. She couldn't have predicted the specific cruelties my father would deploy, or the exact moment I'd reach my breaking point. But she knew the shape of it. She knew the kind of man Gerald was, the kind of trap he'd try to build. And she spent years, quietly, secretly, constructing a door he couldn't lock. That's love. Not words, not promises, action. If I've learned anything from these past 2 years, it's this. The people who truly love you protect you, not by controlling you, but by giving you options, by building foundations you can stand on, by trusting you to find your own way. And second, boundaries aren't betrayal. I spent so long feeling guilty for wanting independence, for not being the obedient daughter my father demanded. I thought something was wrong with me. There wasn't. There never was. Setting boundaries with toxic family isn't cruelty. It's survival. It's self-respect. It's the first step toward a life that belongs to you. Third, sometimes the help you need comes from unexpected places. A grandmother's foresight, a stranger's kindness, an opportunity you almost didn't take. Keep going. Even when it's dark, even when every door seems closed, somewhere, something is being prepared for you. I keep Grandma's letter in my wallet. The paper is soft now from handling, the creases worn thin. Don't let anyone control you with money. Build something that belongs to you. I'm building it, Grandma. Every day, I'm building it. And I'm finally free. That's my story. No magic. No fairy godmother appearing at the last second. Just a grandmother who loved me enough to plan ahead, and a granddaughter who kept going even when it seemed hopeless. If you're watching this and you're stuck in a controlling family, or you've been made to feel worthless by people who should have protected you, I want you to know, it can get better. You can get out, but you might have to build your own door. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this one, and check the description for the next video. I think you'll like it. Take care of yourself. You deserve to be free.